Welcome to Anything But Ordinary with Spooky and Raven. Tonight's topic, Haunted Colorado. I am your host, Spooky, and here is your other most awesome host, Raven.
Hey, how you doing?
I almost forgot the intro.
Yeah, I was wondering when you were gonna go. I kept cueing you. Go now, go now.
Go, go, go.
The music's done. It's time to talk.
So how you doing?
I'm doing a little bit better. I still have a little bit of that head cold left that's been going around to everybody, but
Yeah.
at least my cough isn't as bad. But I got a lot of suggestions from different people on trying like tea and honey or gargle horseradish or all these different things. So some of it's been working. Other stuff, not so much, but
No, get drunk, go to bed. You won't care you're sick.
no, no, thank you. I don't want to do that. I want to get better.
Actually, take a shot of blackberry brandy, go to bed and sweat it out. That works. It really does because it warms you from the inside out. You can also drink ginger tea and do that.
Yeah, ginger baths are good for that too, but hopefully, well, a bunch of people just getting this weird cold. It's been going around to everybody, you know what I mean? But
Right.
tonight's topic is like this recurring theme that we have where, we're basically covering all the different states in the United States for haunted locations in each state. And from our last Haunted State show, we had a viewer request that we do Colorado next, so that's why we're doing Colorado. I think it was Rusty who...
Yeah, I think it was Rusty.
Yeah, so... But the interesting thing is, and it kind of happens a lot when we do this, when I was doing researching for different places, it seemed to me that Colorado is like a hotbed for like paranormal activity because it seemed like it was across the whole entire state.
Right.
And it's just, there was so many to pick from that I think we're just probably going to have to do this state again, too, on one of our reoccurring themes because this state has just so many little towns and so many places where there's so much paranormal activity. But not just, like, spirits and stuff. I've been noticing that some of these places also have, like, Bigfoot things and crypto stuff going on, too, so...
Right. It was actually hard for me really to make a decision on what I wanted to talk about tonight. But I think you're right. I think we're just going to have to do this state again because this state was a hotbed
Right, there's just
of
so many.
paranormal activity.
Right. There's just like a ton of places, and I wish I could have wrote up more to
I do
do for
too.
tonight, but we only go for 2 hours, so
Right.
we're just going to throw out what we can for tonight and then do another one.
Yeah.
So thanks, Rusty, for telling us to go check out Colorado, because your
Right.
state definitely has a lot going on.
Boy, it sure does. Now, most of the time when people think of haunted Colorado, they think of the Stanley Hotel. Now, it seems to be the most popular place in Colorado, and it does have an impressive history. But while looking for haunted places in the state, I was amazed at how many there are. And some are well known and some not so much. And tonight we chose to talk about some of these other places. And it's not that we are not interested in the Stanley, but almost everyone talks about it when discussing haunted places in Colorado. As a matter of fact, it's usually the first place they mention. And we decided to just, talk about some of the other places in the state.
Well, yeah, because anytime, like you said, every time you hear Colorado, you either think of the Stanley Hotel or, dang it, now I just gapped out. Forgot what I was going to say. Oh, well, the fun part of being...
Well, I do too. When people say Colorado, haunted Colorado, I immediately, the first thing I think of is the Stanley.
Yeah, but that, I guess, isn't like the number one most rated haunted place, though. There was a couple other hotels that isn't
Right.
as popular, it seems, as mentioned as the Stanley Hotel.
Well, I think
is.
it's because the Stanley is so famous because of Stephen King and the movie The Shining.
Yeah, that's another one, too. But, I mean, Colorado has a lot of things going to it, too.
Yeah, it does.
I mean, there's so many little ghost towns. I think when we do another abandoned towns and stuff in the United States, definitely Colorado will be on there, too, because there were so many that I was finding where you could just talk about the whole history of just a town when it went up, just when they had the whole mining and gold rush of
Right.
silver and gold. And some of these towns,
And lead.
yeah, they had like some really interesting history and bunch of outlaws and some stuff like that. So I know we're going to be talking a little bit on that too. But tonight, I don't know. You want to go first for?
Well,
tonight?
thank you. I think I will. My first pick was Fort Carson. Now, Fort Carson is just outside of Colorado Springs, and it is an active military base. And there were actually two interesting things that I found there, so I decided to include both of them because they're actually very short stories. Building 1047. Now, while there are tours through Old Fort Carson, this is one that is not on the tour because this is a barracks and it's still being used. On the third floor, the story is that a soldier went crazy and killed 3 other soldiers. And I looked and looked, and I just could not find the reason why he just went ballistic and killed these soldiers. But the soldiers that are living in the barracks now and that are on the third floor say that you can hear what sounds like crying. And some say that if you go into room 313, you feel cold spots. Beds will shake in this barracks. Stuff will fall. And they say that you can even make out what looks like a man just sitting there looking at you in the dark. The other place was the old Fort Carson Hospital and Mental Clinic. Now, the old hospital and other surrounding buildings were built around 1941, just after the attack on Pearl Harbor.
Yeah.
Now, in the 40s, there were a lot of German and Italian POWs located at Fort Carson. There is also this intricate I will get it out. Spit it out, Spooky.
Tap you on your back. You can do it.
Yeah, somebody slapped me on the back. A system of tunnels linking all these buildings together. Now, one night, one of the post's military police investigated an open door, and deep into one of the tunnels, he found an old setup of children's toys. There was a small chair, a small kid's table, and a few other things. Now, this was, stuff that was set up. They said it looked like it was from around the, 40s.
That's kind of interesting, though.
Yeah. There were also words painted inside an area under the building with no visible way to get inside and paint them. And this was witnessed by 3 military policemen. And they said the words didn't make any sense. And when they attempted to look for them on a later date, these words were gone. I tried to find what the words were, and there was nothing mentioned about them, just that they had been painted on the wall. And these military policemen said that they weren't painted over because the surface wasn't painted, and the walls weren't sandblasted or anything, and the words were just gone. Now, like I said, I tried my best to find out what the words were, but I couldn't find a thing about them. And the paranormal activity in this place, they say on some nights, especially when the weather gets colder, you can hear strange noises, not only in the building, but down in the tunnels. Movement is heard through the building, like furniture is being shoved around. They say there's a repetitive banging noise, and sometimes faces are seen peering through the barred windows.
That'd be kind of cool.
Yeah, really. Now, at one time, an elderly American Indian woman told them that the site is directly on the old Trail of Tears. And she also said that there is a large, low-lying field there where no structure will stand. And there have been several attempts at putting a building there, but it's been unsuccessful. The building just will not stand on that particular piece of ground.
Probably, I don't know. I think I've kind of read about all these different other things, but there are like other military bases and things that have to do with the military. They seem to have like reoccurring, either like residual or
Yeah.
people claim to have seen spirits that are actually interacting with them. And it makes me wonder if it's just, and it's kind of sad, but it makes me wonder if it's kind of like people who died during war and then they come back to the original base and keep doing their things, or if they have
Right.
items that may have some type of attached stuff to it, and then they bring it back to these buildings, and then these spirits hang out there. It makes you wonder why they're haunting.
When I look up places with paranormal activity, there are two places that usually pop up: military bases and prisons. So it just seems like a lot of them just are haunted. And
Yeah.
it could be from just about anything. I mean, there are times when people, like, I had heard stories about when they had the draft, and people that were drafted that really didn't want to be in the military, and they just couldn't take military life, and they've actually committed suicide.
Yeah, that's true too. That does happen more than
So
people want to
more than
think.
people want to really
No,
think
right.
about. Exactly.
A suicide
Exactly.
rate with soldiers is kind of high, even
Yeah,
when
it
they're
is.
in it and once they're out as veterans. And
Right.
it's really sad.
It really is.
How they're treated sometimes afterwards and during.
I know.
I don't know.
I don't really want to get into that, though, because I just happen to believe that this country doesn't do enough for their veterans. But there just about any military base, not all of them now, but there are a lot of military bases in this country that you can go to that they have some sort of paranormal activity, and it's really kind of hard to say why.
Right. Well, we wanted to find more pictures of this place, but we couldn't because of copyrighted issues or whatever. There are
Right.
photos that you guys can go and kind of look around at different buildings and stuff, but we try not to,
We do not want to infringe on copyrights.
write or use other people's stuff without permission or whatever. But I thought this one was kind of interesting. But I don't know. I think there's probably more going on than just what
Well,
you mentioned.
It's not only Fort Carson, though. Colorado Springs was a plethora of paranormal activity all over the town, all over the city.
Well,
There were numerous places in Colorado Springs that were listed on the list of haunted places.
right, just
in
for Colorado Springs,
Just
we could do one whole show. Even
exactly.
maybe even have to do a couple. Like each different little city or town, they had so many different haunted spots or claimed to be haunted. Like I said, this would take us for like ever. I think Colorado and New Orleans are basically one of the, really from what I've read so far from doing the different states, seem to have the most activity that
I
was
know.
reading.
I noticed that because when I was looking up places in Colorado, I was thinking, oh my goodness, especially when I got to Colorado Springs, I thought, oh my goodness, this place is as haunted as New Orleans. And New Orleans is considered one of the most haunted cities in America.
Yeah, it is. That's another one we got to do. But I mean, there's places that are just haunted that don't even have any buildings left or anything. They're just ground,
Right.
like battlefield type of thing, or just open fields and stuff. And a lot of people
Exactly.
are still having that activity going there. And I think it's just from a lot of the people that kept coming in during the gold rush and the silver and stuff like that. But
Right.
I don't know. Do you care if I go on to the next one?
No, help yourself.
Well, that's why we're here.
That's nice of me, isn't it?
Yeah.
No, sorry.
Well, the next one I found is called Pioneer Park, or the Henry Weber House, which is located on West Bleecker Street in Aspen, Colorado. Which Aspen seems like a really cool place. If you
I know, but it's
you're
an
into
expensive
skiing.
place.
Well, it kind of started up because of this guy and a couple other guys when I was reading the history. And the guy actually who moved into this house after this guy was the one who started up the whole kind of ski resort thing in Aspen, which I thought was kind of interesting. But this building is kind of it's like a 1.5 story brick structure, and it was built in 1880s by this guy named Henry Weber. And I guess at the time he was kind of like semi-wealthy shoe merchant. And because he made some money by, selling shoes and making clothes and stuff to the miners and stuff, that's when he kind of invested into the mining during that time, during Colorado's silver boom. And basically both of his businesses were extremely successful, thus kind of giving him like a really good little nest egg at the time. So it was like during 1881, when him and his wife were working there for a while and just got their businesses really going and they were just raking in the money. That's when her name was Harriet, she died of an overdose of strychnine, which I was just like,
Oh my.
what? I know, that's not...
That was not an easy death.
Well, right. And which was kind of off, but the funny thing is that I found out about strychnine back in the 1880s. A lot of people actually used it as an over-the-counter tranquilizer. That's not something you really want to use, you know?
No.
But back then, they were just trying a little bit of everything, you know? From strychnine to morphine to you name it, but...
Well, laudanum was another one that they used, and a lot of people became addicted to it because laudanum is opium-based.
Right. Well, when people kind of found out that she had died from an overdose of strychnine, that's when the rumors started going around about her death, that it was either a suicide or he murdered her, because many believed that Henry was actually having an affair with his wife Harriet's niece at the time when they were married. So that's just what some of the sites were talking about, but a couple of the sites that I was reading, they claimed that one of her last words were, "Henry will know." So I don't know. A lot of people assumed because that was her last words, like he had something to do with her death, or he knew why she died, you know, of a strychnine overdose. But anyway, a few months after she had passed away, Henry did actually end up marrying Harriet's niece, Julia. So it seems to me that the rumors were true, that he was having an affair. So anyway, he married Julia, and then they ended up purchasing the land and built this house on it. So despite kind of like the accusations of him kind of being a murderer over the years, he was actually a really popular businessman in the town. But he did kind of cheat while he was married with her, but then when she died, he ended up building this house, like I said, afterwards. But he ended up being, I think he was elected mayor of Aspen, like not long after too. And when he was serving his term as mayor of Aspen, that's when everybody kind of found out that he was actually already married previously before Harriet. And he actually ditched his first wife and kids and then moved out to Colorado and made all this big bank. And then, you know, so he kind of already had a shady past. But people didn't really care because he was actually making the town money and making it popular, and he helped build up other buildings and stuff. And I guess if you go around Aspen, you'll see his name on some of these old buildings and stuff. But I don't know. A lot of people still think that he kind of murdered her, but a lot of people are just
kind of sounds like it, doesn't it?
Yeah, but they didn't really care because he was bringing, you know, the town like a bunch of success. But anyway, during the time that Henry and Julia were living in the house, they often would hear these footsteps inside the empty rooms along with on top of the roof. So it was kind of driving them nuts. They couldn't figure out where like somebody was walking around, but they couldn't figure out who was doing this or where it was coming from. And they also claimed that they actually seen the windows being opened and closed many times on their own. And they also were hearing like this disembodied voices. And that was just while they built the house and were living there. So a lot of people are assuming that it's Harriet that's haunting this just because it kind of started up right away once they built the building. But by 1911, Henry passed away, and then the Weber home was purchased by this local blacksmith, and then he lived there for a while until, you know, the gold rush and the silver rush or whatever kind of died down, and then, you know, a bunch of people start moving away to go to the next place, you know what I mean?
Right.
Well, during that time, a lot of the homes in the area kind of kind of went empty, and then they were just kind of going back into nature, you know what I mean, being rubble and whatever. But this house kind of passed hands like a few different times, and it is now on like the National Registry of Historic Places. But it seems like everything that I was reading from all the different families that did happen to live here, or the people who did happen to be in there, everybody claims to have had paranormal activity happen. Now, many, like I said, believe that this house is haunted by Harriet just because people believe that she was actually murdered or she committed suicide, and then she was really angry or upset about Henry having this affair with her niece and stuff, so she just kind of stuck around because of some unfinished business or like a type of negative emotion that everybody's trying to say or whatever. But I think what they're saying is like she was basically stalking her husband during her death or whatever. But what I was reading was saying that they hear footsteps all the time, and it wasn't just them, it was everybody who was in here. Everybody's been seeing the windows opening and closing. A woman's been seen in and on the grounds of the Weber home as well, and people are hearing disembodied voices with their ears, not just like a recorder. So you know what I mean? So
Right.
a lot of people think it's just Harriet that has to be haunting it since it picked up right away since Henry and Julia built the house, but who knows? It could be the land too. You never know. No.
Well, that's true too, because you got to stop and think. Basically, that was a brand new house because she died in what, like 1881, did you say? And the house was built a few years later. So, but
yeah,
you know
it was
what?
built like 4 years later.
Yeah, but you know
After
what?
her death.
I have heard of cases though where a spouse would pass away under suspicious circumstances, and their ghost would stalk the living spouse. I've heard of cases like that. So it's a possibility that is what happened.
I mean, nobody really knows. I mean, it's hard to say like this is. I mean, because I don't care what anybody says. You can't state everything like this is how it is, period, because I just know, or like you just don't. You just know something's occurring. We don't know why it's occurring, but something's occurring, and several people have heard it throughout the years. And maybe I don't even.
And
know.
it seems like that everybody that has lived in this home has reported paranormal activity, but they're not saying, "Oh, we've seen several spirits." They just talk about one of a woman.
Or they hear footsteps upstairs and stuff.
Right.
Somebody's walking about anyway. But they do keep seeing the windows opening and closing. So that would kind of drive me nuts,
Yeah, it would
especially
drive
in the
me nuts, too.
wintertime. Be like, you know how much it costs to heat this place,
I know. I can see you walking through there too. Knock it off.
Do you know how much it costs?
We're not heating the outside.
Although, well, you have to be kind of rich to live in Aspen. But this is a place that it's basically the same. It hasn't really been changed a whole lot. I get, like, the second or third owners who came, I think they did add, like, a swimming pool and then added, like, an extra a barn or another building out back. But it's all original from when they first built it, and it's on the historic registry, too. So it's kind of a cool-looking building. You can go on Google and kind of zip around it that way. For those of you who aren't rich and can't travel the world like the rest of us, Google Earth works out pretty good that way. But
Yeah, it does.
this place, I don't think that you can actually go and visit. You know what I mean? But a lot of the other ones tonight that we are going to talk about, you can go with and do like a paranormal tour, or possibly pay him some money to do a ghost hunt on your own. But this place I think it's privately owned, so we don't suggest you guys go stalk these people. So they'll probably get in trouble. But I thought this one I just thought was interesting because, this house was built 4 years after his wife died. But I'm thinking, man,
Right.
she must be raging mad to, hang
Well,
around
it
for like
seems to
4
it
years.
seems to me that if it was like built on an Indian burial ground, or if it was built on a ground, that had something, connected to it, that they would be seeing more spirits than what they're seeing. But it's really interesting that they're only seeing one, and it's a woman.
And of that time period. So
Yeah, and it's almost like, you built her a brand new house. Well, I'm going to drive you out of it.
right, but maybe she's just really angry that
Yeah.
she lost her life for whatever reason.
Because apparently after he died, the widow sold the house. She didn't stay there.
No, and that's when the blacksmith guy took it over for a while, and then after he left, then the Perchilets, I think that's how you say their name. It's Prechtls. Then they took it over and stuff. But it's only been passed through a couple of hands. But everybody who's been there, and I guess supposedly even Arnold Schwarzenegger stayed there for a little bit when the rich guy was living there. I think he was one of the last owners. and he was the one who was helping Aspen become into like a ski resort thing. But there was some interesting rich people who have lived and come and gone through this house. So you wouldn't really think so for how it looks, but I think she was just mad because they finally, she worked her butt off with him to get successful business going on, and they finally got a good clothing and shoe repair shop going. They were making some good money. Then they got invested into the gold mine stuff, and they were finally making bank, and then all of a sudden she died. She died when they just made it rich, and also he seems to be having a little fun on the side with a younger lady.
You know what?
So
Maybe
I'm
it's just
thinking,
me, but if I found out that my husband was having an affair, especially with one of my relatives, I don't think it'd be myself that I would kill.
let's stop there. It's just in case anything ever happens in the future. They don't want to come back and listen to this show where, well, she just incriminated herself.
Well, I didn't mean it that way. I mean, I would not kill myself and so they can enjoy the riches, I mean, I would.
You'd be taking that stuff with you. This stuff's going in my coffin.
I would be taking it. Yeah, I'd empty out a trunk and say, all that gold you got stashed under the floorboards? Not there anymore. That's exactly what I would be doing.
Should be burning it
Okay.
up.
On that note, the Molly Brown house. It's at 1340 Pennsylvania Street in Denver, Colorado. We could do an entire show about Molly Brown. This was an amazing woman. The house was built in 1889. It is a beautiful red and gray rhyolite stone.
Whoops, it took me a little bit to get the photo. Sorry, guys.
That's all right. It's a 7,000 square foot Victorian, and it's 3 stories with the usual attic and basement. And like I said, its claim to fame is that Molly Brown and her husband, James Joseph Brown, bought this mansion in 1894. Now, Margaret Tobin Brown, or Molly Brown, was traveling on the Titanic when it hit an iceberg and sank in 1912. And she lived to tell about it. After her lifeboat was picked up, she began to take care of the survivors, giving no concern to her own needs. She even took care of the people in the lifeboat until it was found. Because of her selfishness in tending to the survivors, she became a national heroine, and which inspired a Broadway show in the 1960s titled The Unsinkable Molly Brown.
Oh, yeah.
Now, this particular show jogged the memories of the people in Denver about all of the accomplishments of this amazing woman.
Yeah.
And it also helped to save this home from the wrecking ball because the house had fallen into disrepair.
Can I just say this? Every time you hear the word wrecking ball or just somebody mentions it in passing, it's kind of ruined for me now because of that one song, by Miley Cyrus. You know what I'm talking about?
Oh, yeah.
So, I'm sorry. Thanks for ruining the word wrecking ball for me, Miley Cyrus.
You're very welcome.
Did you write the song for? Not you, she did it. Her and her father should be fired from the music industry.
Yeah, they should. Margaret Tobin Brown was born July 18th, 1867, into this hard-working blue-collar family with 6 children. Now, at an early age, she learned the value of the importance of hard work and education. And she eventually moved to Leadville, Colorado, where she worked at a goods store and lived with her brother. Now, Molly had a dream of marrying a rich man so she could help her family. But at this church picnic, she met James Joseph, or J.J. Brown, who was a poor man, but he ended up being the love of her life. Now, changing her dream, she married for love in 1886. Now, J.J. worked in the lead mine, so they moved closer to where he worked into a 2-room log cabin. And Molly continued her education, and she hired tutors to study reading and literature and music. And the Irish maid that they had hired studied with Molly. And this was a practice that Molly continued through her life, of always including the servants in her own tutoring sessions. This woman just went for education after education after education. She was just absolutely determined to educate herself.
She's a smart woman. She
She
wasn't
was a
going to
very
let the time period back then hold her down just because she was a female.
exactly. And by 1889, Molly and JJ, they had 2 children and they were living back in Leadville. Now, at that time, they rented a nice house and because nearly all of the Tobin clan was living nearby. She was also very family oriented. Being in charge of the mining operations of Ibex Mining Company, which I think is still in business, JJ began making good money, and because of his hard work and his business sense, he was able to purchase the Little Johnny mine. And this brought a huge change in their finances because a large vein of gold was discovered in that mine. And the grade of gold was so pure and the vein was so wide that it was touted as being the world's richest gold strike.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, they went from being almost poor to being filthy rich literally overnight.
Yeah.
It also revitalized the mining industry in Leadville. And the Brown family moved to Denver, where they bought this mansion. And actually, even though the house is a good size, it was not considered a large mansion by any standards. But this is the house that Molly wanted. It was the house that she got. Now, this was also just the beginning of her life of serving others less fortunate than herself, because she believed that money was a tool for helping others.
It should be. It should be.
It should be. But by the end of her life, Molly's humanitarian and philanthropic service and her never-ending spirit were very well recognized. Well, in 1909, her marriage to JJ ended, but they remained very good friends. And it was very hard because it was very hard for JJ to be married to this dynamic woman. I mean, it was just like they were like opposites. She was so extroverted, and out helping people and getting things done. And here was this man, even though he had a brilliant mind, he was just not, he was introverted.
Well, opposites attract, they say.
That's true. That's what they say. She became active in social causes such as raising money for a juvenile justice system. She became involved in the Red Cross. She went over to France during World War I and helped the people there through an organization called the American Committee for Devastated France. Now, when her marriage ended, Molly Brown spent less and less time in Denver, so she decided to rent their house out to various families for many years. But the Great Depression forced her to turn the house into a boarding facility. Now, when she died in 1932, this house was in a rundown condition, and the new owners altered the house to create 12 separate spaces for renters.
I wonder if that's when the paranormal activity started to pick up, when they started to rearrange and reconstruct the inside.
It very well could have, because here these people bought her home and they changed it. And in 1958, this man named Art Leesenring bought the house, and he ran a gentleman's boarding house for 2 years. Then he leased it to the city of Denver, and it was made a home for wayward girls. But by 1970, urban renewal was in full swing, and the house was going to be demolished. So Leesenring formed a Historic Denver Incorporated and raised money to save the Molly Brown house. Now, the house was meticulously restored to its former glory, and it was opened as a museum. Now, the Browns had always had a lot of people staying with them, so it's really not surprising that entities are attracted to this house. And the entities of Molly Brown and her husband JJ, they say, still roam around the house, going about their business. The staff and the guests to the museum have smelled pipe and cigar smoke.
Yeah.
JJ enjoyed his smoke time, and there's no smoking allowed in this place, none. So this has been attributed to JJ in enjoying his smoke time.
But has this
Um,
always been a smoke-free house? Because if somebody had smoked in it at some point, the smoke goes into the wood. So if you have,
I really don't know. I just read that JJ uh, just enjoyed his smoke time, and there have been cold spots that have been felt in Molly Brown's room, and her apparition has been seen as she goes around corners. Now there is a female entity in there that is dressed in Victorian dress, and this female apparition, I found this kind of interesting. This female apparition likes to sit at the dining room table, and has even allowed the living to take pictures of her.
wow. So she like a
She's
full-on
interacting.
apparition, practically.
Exactly. Yeah, they said that to look at her, you would think that it was like a reenactor, dressed in period attire. And if she's feeling energetic, she likes to rearrange the chairs around this same table. So apparently, this must have been her favorite table. Now, JJ and Molly had a daughter named Catherine Ellen who died young, probably from a disease. And the window blinds in Catherine Ellen's room, they'll raise and lower on their own. And Molly's mother, Johanna, used to stay in Catherine's old room, and the image of the image of Johanna, I want to say entity, her entity has been seen in the room's window. And there's also the entity of a male servant who seems to be in a grumpy mood, has been seen in the mirror hanging near the stairs on the first floor. They just said that the expression on his face just makes you think that he's in a grumpy mood.
Well, if you can't smoke.
Well, if you can't smoke, you're grumpy. If
Right.
you're a smoker.
But the one thing that I just have a hard time with is when people say that, well, they always smell smoke in buildings. But a lot of buildings back in the day, you were heated by wood. So you have
Yeah.
the smoke that goes into the wood. And if you had a heavy smoker, that smoke goes into the wood and it stays. So if you have all the right temperatures and day, with the weather and
Well,
everything, you're going to smell that again.
back then, a lot of people smoked. I mean, a lot of people smoked. They'd be standing in the courthouse, during a court session, smoking.
Well, they chewed too, though. They had those.
And they chewed too,
big
because there's
sticks
spittoons
of-
all over the place.
Well,
But there is a distinct difference in the smell of smoke from wood and smoke from a cigar or a pipe. And like you say, JJ was a smoker.
so he might have
And
smoked
I'm
a
sure
lot.
that everybody that came into this home, because they entertained on a regular basis, and there were a lot of people in and out of this home, and and I would just about imagine they were all, at least the men were all smokers. Back then, women weren't allowed to
Well,
smoke.
they're
They had
still
to smoke in
smoking.
hiding.
Yeah, they're still. Well, they don't have to hide no more. Now everything's
Not
legal.
anymore, but back then, actually, when a woman smoked back then,
Yeah.
she had to smoke in secret.
Right. Well, nowadays you don't have to smoke in secret in Colorado.
Right.
Now they even got every kind of smoke legal to smoke almost.
Yeah. Colorado does anyway. Makes you almost want to move there.
Not me. Too many people. Everybody's be moving there now just because of the marijuana thing. But I think as far as if I smell smoke, I'm just not really going to believe it's paranormal. But as far as the other activity goes, I mean, that's kind of hard to say like that wasn't. I mean, when you see a full body apparition of a woman, she's like, yeah, go ahead, take my picture. I'd be like, thank you. But nowadays, people probably wouldn't even believe you anyway. They'd probably say, oh, it's one of those fake apps or anything. So even if you do actually get something nowadays, a lot of people are like, well, we don't believe you. Just because there's so much fakery out there now.
I found that very, very interesting that the entity in the Victorian dress was so interactive, because she actually, according to the stories and the reports, she actually interacts with the people in there.
Well, why not? I mean, she was a very interesting woman and gone through a lot of
I think I would do
things.
that if I was a ghost haunting a place. I think I would do that. Why not?
This place on the historic registry too?
Yes, it is. It's on the National Historic Registry.
Seems like almost everything is
You
in
can
Colorado.
go to the website, and for the hours of operation, there are tours through there. It didn't really say how much the tours cost.
Do they let you do paranormal stuff there or not so much?
There have been paranormal investigators in there. They have let them in. But like I said, we could have done a whole show on Molly Brown. She was just an amazing, amazing woman.
Oh,
And
super strong.
she was basically she was the superstar of her day.
Not
As far
superstar,
as-
super
as far as-
strong. Strong
as-
meaning,
Well,
she
I
went through
understand
everything.
that.
But I
Super
guess we could
strong
call
too.
her
She was a
super
very
strong.
strong woman. I mean, she got a lifeboat full of people through the sinking of the Titanic.
I know, that's amazing
then-
just alone. But hey, maybe some of the spirits that she helped, or with the people that she helped save and stuff, and when they passed over, maybe they all just wanted to keep hanging out with her. So maybe there's just a group of them all hanging out in this place. Just because of who she was and her personality and her energy. I'm sure
But they said she had a very strong personality, and she never, never, never quit educating herself. And I also found it interesting that she would include her servants in her tutoring sessions if they wanted to learn to read. Because you got to stop and think. Back then, education was not a big thing. Okay? A lot of people left school, some in the 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th grade to go to work to help their families. And the people that were, I don't want to use the term completely educated, but college educated, came from wealthy families, people who could afford it.
Well, yeah.
And she did not come from a wealthy family, and she spent a lifetime educating herself and also helping her servants and other people become educated.
Right, so I'm just assuming that she probably attracted not only the living but the dead just because of her amazing personality. Maybe she was like one of those people who were like a light beacon. So,
Yeah.
Maybe that's why people were always experiencing different types of paranormal activity in this building even while she was alive. But I think it's kind of an interesting... I would just go just because of who she was as a person, not so much for
Right.
paranormal activity, but because of who she was and her story and how she was determined to, learn everything that she could. It's almost like she didn't waste her life, and she was very grateful to have the
I like to
second
watch
chance of having a
right.
life.
I like to watch old movies. Matter of fact, I like, unless it's science fiction, I prefer old movies. And I saw the movie The Unsinkable Molly Brown, and I remember thinking, oh, this can't be right. Nobody's like that. But she was. Everything that I read about her, just it's like it made me think of a certain scene in that movie. So this was a woman who lived life to the fullest, and she was larger than life. So she, like I said, we could have done an entire show on this woman.
Yeah, but that's not. Well, tonight's a paranormal thing, not so much on
Right.
the history or the person, but we have to tell part of it to explain why this house may have the activity that it has.
Well, exactly.
But it seems like she's just as friendly in her spirit form as she was. Well, because you are who you are, period. If you lose your body,
Right.
you're still who you are. Your personality stays. So if you're a jerk in life,
Right.
you're going to be a jerk in the afterlife. But if you're...
The thing of it is, though, I didn't find anything. The only thing that I found about her entity was that people normally, they would see her entity like going around a corner, like she, is off to a certain part of the house on her daily business in her home. But I didn't find anything about her interacting with anyone.
Oh, I thought you said that she would allow people to take photos of her.
No, this is another entity that's in the house.
Oh, a different entity.
This is
maybe it's like a
different-
nanny, or not a nanny, but one of the...
I don't know, but that was a different
workers.
female entity in the house that was dressed in a Victorian dress. She interacts with people.
Okay. Well, I don't know. It's hard to say what you're seeing when you are seeing something half the
Right.
time. And then when you do happen to see something, it's either out of the corner of your eye or it goes by so fast before you can even react or take a picture or do anything or hit the person next to you, be like, did you just see that? You know, because everything happens so fast, and that's why this paranormal field, a lot of people don't have what they, I mean, you have more experiences than you do have proof, just because of how quickly things occur, and your mind can't react on a split second, like, oh my gosh.
Yeah,
I got
more than once. I've been in a place investigating more than once. I have gone around a corner in that place, and there was an entity there, and just as quick as I saw it, it was gone. So you can't always get that camera up and start and click that picture,
right?
But because sometimes things just happen so fast,
but it
that
seems
you just don't have a time to react.
Right, but it seems like sometimes when people do that, and then they do snap the picture or whatever, for whatever reason, these things don't show up. You see it with your physical eye, but then you don't see it with the camera and the picture and the video that everybody's doing. And then sometimes it's the other way around. All of a sudden you take a picture, and then there's this thing in front of you that you didn't see, and you're like, what?
Right.
So I don't know. I think this place, I would just go to this place just for her.
If I'm
alone.
ever in Denver, I'm going to make it a point to go to the Molly Brown house.
Oh, for sure. Not just for the paranormal activity.
I'm going to put the Molly Brown house on my bucket list.
Yeah, she'd been somebody cool to meet in real life. I mean,
I
if
like
anything,
Colorado anyway, so that'd be another reason to go there.
I don't know. I've never been to Colorado, so I can't say if I'd like it or not. But I do love nature and wilderness and the mountains and stuff, so I'm assuming I probably would love Colorado. But do you care if I go on to the next one?
No, I sure don't.
Okay, I found this one, and actually the whole town's kind of cool, but it's called Twin Lakes Inn, and it's located on 6435 East State Highway 82 in Twin Lakes, Colorado. And it seems like almost every building here is got some kind of activity, but not just activity. They claim to also have like some cryptids running around here too. So this might be a cool getaway, just to, hey, I'm just going to take a little drive out this way, just check this out. Because if they got paranormal activity hitting every building around here and then have some type of cryptid, this kind of might be an interesting one. But they say the Twin Lakes was a mining, like transportation stop during the gold rush in 1860. And that's when all these buildings started to kind of build up around here. And they say the inn was once used as a stage stop, a hotel, and a brothel. Kind of like almost all at the same time. And it was built in 1879 by this lady named Maggie Weber. Now, many reported, when I was reading on the internet, that there was a lot of accidents that seemed to happen in the Twin Lakes area. And one of them was when this storm kind of kicked up and it sunk one of the ferries kind of going across the lakes, and it ended up killing like several people nearby. And then there was like another accident that I read, but seemed kind of big, was there was an avalanche that happened in the 60s that killed like 7 people. So I'm wondering if them two big incidences might have trapped or kept some of these people's spirits in the area because they were such tragic things that kind of happened really quickly. But anyway, the Twin Lakes Inn, it kind of had like many owners and different name changes throughout the years, but the town itself has basically stayed the same. Nobody's really changed in the building since the original were built. And it is on the National History Registry. But many claim that this inn is haunted. And a lot of people over the years have heard, footsteps of like boots walking along the hallways. And some have actually even heard like a music box being turned on by itself in the bar below, like the tavern area. Yeah. And a lot of the staff have said when they're making up the beds and stuff after the people are gone and stuff, and then they'll go back in the room and they'll see like hand impressions on the bed, or sometimes a lot of times it looks like someone is actually sitting on the bed, so you can see their butt mark. You know what I mean?
That's what I was thinking, their butt impressions.
Yeah, so a lot of times they come back and it looks like somebody's actually sitting down on the bed or was just sitting on the bed, even though they just neatly made it up, but for the next visitors, or you know what I mean. Now, some have actually claimed to have seen apparitions. And one of the apparitions that a lot of people keep seeing, and in just this one building, is that of a cowboy. And he's, a lot of times when they see him, he'll be like leaning up against a door, kind of watching the person of what they're kind of doing. You know how they just lean up on the door jar, what do you call that, jam? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So he's kind of just kicking back, watching them and stuff. And then when they kind of like look at him, they see him, then they look back down, they look back up, then he kind of fades away. And then they say some people have seen a woman and she's kind of dressed in like this polka dotted dress. And people have seen her kind of moving about throughout the inn, not just in one room, but kind of in different spots. And others have claimed to have seen objects being moved or thrown up in this inn. And they've had like glasses moved, picture frames moved, or things taken off the wall, windows open and closed. A lot of stuff, I guess, happens in the tavern bar part, too, a lot. But people have actually said they've seen orbs that kind of emit their own light with their eyes, not just like photos and stuff. And to me, that's interesting if you see an orb that's like a glowing ball flying right in front of your face. I mean, a lot of people don't say that they see it with their own eyes. They usually say, oh, I see it on camera or, what have you. People are actually recording disembodied voices with their digital recorders at this building, too. But some people were saying that they've actually seen disembodied just body parts being seen, like not the whole physical body of a spirit. It's not physical, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
But they'll see like a couple pair of hands. I don't know what the hands are doing, but a lot of times they end up just seeing
that would be a little
hands.
that would be a little bit disturbing to me if I was watching something, just saw a pair of legs walk across the floor and nothing above them.
That does occur a lot in
I
a
know
lot
it
of these
does. I've
places that
seen
we're
it.
reading. But it's just not just this inn, but it seems like every place in this town, like outside and inside of these different buildings, there's a lot of activity going on. But there's a lot going on in this building alone, and that you're actually seeing apparitions, full body apparitions. You're having objects being moved. You're hearing disembodied voices, and it is being recorded on recorders too. They're having people hear footsteps. They're having music boxes being turned on. They're having objects being moved from one room to another. They're seeing images of, like, it looks like a person that's sitting on a bed, but there's nobody there, and then they go and straighten it up or whatever. But I mean, there's a lot going on. But from what it seems, I would kind of go to this town because it's like everywhere you go, you're going to get something. But they're also saying in the lake that's kind of nearby this inn, it has like this monster in it, like the lake monsters are all talking about, like, and they claimed that it kind of looks like the one from Loch Ness. And what's that other lake that supposedly has like a dinosaur?
Champlain?
Yeah, well, they've named this one Bessie too. So I guess if you're going to go visit this town, you'll have like several locations you can kind of check out, not just this one inn. And then you can also go like a little crypto hunting on the lake or fishing. I don't know if you want to go fishing for a dinosaur though, you know what I mean? Better bring big enough boat. But who knows?
Really?
I don't know, but it is a historic inn, and it was formerly like a stage stop and a brothel. So who knows what went on during the brothel years? A lot of people could have got shot or hurt or what have you. So it just seems like a lot of people who go here, who have been here, and not just all the different owners, but the people who are staying here too, are constantly have things interacting with them as far as paranormal things go. But this is kind of like a good hotspot since it has a little variety of it all. You're not just hearing footsteps or the window and stuff ain't creaking. You're hearing like a little bit of everything. So it's cool.
That would be another place I would like to go to. And I'm looking at the picture now. Mm-hmm. So it's in the mountains.
Yeah, it's cool. It's actually cool. If you look on it and Google this place, it's called the Twin Lakes Inn. If you kind of just spin around, it's like in the middle of a bunch of mountains, and then it's got these two gorgeous lakes next to them that was created by the glaciers or whatever they talk about.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like a beautiful place if you're into like, not such a big city person, and a little small town and just nature and everything. You kind of got it all.
I would rather go to those small towns anyway. I'm not a big city person. I have no desire to go to like New York City or a place like that. Now I would go to Denver just because there are a couple places I read about in Denver that I would like to visit. Mm-hmm. But a place like this, it's in a small town, it's up in the mountains, there's lakes there, and it's an old place. Yeah, I would love to go to a place like that.
Well, right, but it's not the only building in the Twin Lakes area that's reported to have a lot of paranormal activity. But this Twin Lakes Inn, you're going to hopefully, because it seems like everybody who's there goes or has an experience one way or the other, from, a full body apparition right in front of you to, hearing things or actually seeing objects move and stuff. So I guess if you're into the paranormal and want to go ghost hunting tour, this probably be a good place to go, because
Yeah.
more than likely you'll probably get something or experience something, so.
That's what I'd like to do this year. I'd like to go on a paranormal vacation, and that would be one of the places that I would like to go.
Do you want to take a quick break?
Yes, I do, because the next one is a little bit long.
Okay, we're just gonna take like a 3-minute break real quick, so just get a drink of water or whatever. So don't leave. We're gonna go into our second half of our show. So those of you guys want to get a snack or something to drink or have a smoke, we'll be right back in about 3 minutes. So don't leave. Thank you for coming and thank you for sharing with us, and we'll be right back. Welcome back to Anything But Ordinary. I'm your host, Raven, and Spooky's back with us. We're going to continue the second half of Haunted Colorado. It's a reoccurring theme that we do. We're trying to hit every state and share all the different paranormal locations and stuff. I think once we go through every state, we'll probably start to go overseas and sharing different places overseas too, but
Yeah, or some of the states that we find, really, really interesting, like Colorado, we may do a second half on it, which I'm sure we will.
well, yeah, Colorado and New Orleans for sure. But I just want to thank the viewer Rusty for suggesting tonight for Haunted Colorado, his
Oh,
state.
absolutely.
So we appreciate it, because I got to researching, and there's just so many amazing places in Colorado. If you're into history, if you're into paranormal, you're into cryptid things, there's a kind of a variety of things.
I know, there's all kinds of things in that state. And we do read our viewers' requests, and we do research them, and we try to get to them just as soon as we can.
Right. And for those of you who are like, why do you guys play, these weird musics or different music? We play the music that YouTube
I
allows
like
us.
weird music.
Well, me too. But we play the music that we can. YouTube gives us copyrighted free music to use and stuff like that.
I'm not paying royalties.
Well, yeah,
ain't
or
cheap.
if you play stuff that's copyrighted, it kicks your YouTube thing right off. But we decided to put a little metal in, because usually you do a little country we can find on there, and tonight I did a little metal. But
Because I tell you what, if we were able to
play what we wanted,
play what we wanted,
yeah,
I
There'd
would
be a whole
have a
bunch of
much
stuff.
better intro music.
I like the intro music.
I do like the intro music. Don't get me wrong, I do. But I would put something in there that I wanted in there,
Well, I like the intro music. Thank you very much, and I'm glad I found it. But I'm not going to play like rock music or anything for an intro. Maybe intermission stuff, but not intro things. But
Yeah.
why don't you go ahead and do your next topic?
This is Cheeseman Park, and it's located at 8th Avenue and Franklin Street in Denver, Colorado. And this is another place that I would go to Denver for, just to walk through this place. Now, in 1858, a man named William Larimer set aside 320 acres of land to be used as a cemetery in this new and growing city of Denver, Colorado. And he named the cemetery Mount Prospect. Now, the sites on the crest of the hill were to be set aside for the rich and influential residents. The paupers and criminals were buried on the far edges of the graveyard, and then the so-called ordinary people would be buried somewhere in the middle. Now, the first burials to take place here were the victims of crime and violence. It was a Hungarian immigrant named John Stoffel who had come to Denver to settle a dispute with his brother-in-law and ended up murdering him. Now, after a short trial, Stoffel was dragged away by a mob and hanged from a cottonwood tree. And he and his brother-in-law were then taken to Mount Prospect, and their bodies were unceremoniously dumped into the same grave. Murder victims and those killed in accidents continued to be buried in the lower sections of the cemetery. And the name Mount Prospect began to fall out of use because most people just simply referred to the place as the Old Bone Yard or Boot Hill. Now, this cemetery failed to gain the respect and the reverence that Larimer intended for it to have, and as time went on, Denver began to flourish. Now, there were large fortunes made in the silver mining and real estate, and in 1873, the city fathers, who were embarrassed by the seedy reputation of this cemetery and the nickname Boot Hill, they decided to rename the graveyard the City Cemetery. But even the new name couldn't hide the fact that this place was becoming an eyesore. Nobody just kept it up. It was basically going back to nature, with a lack of interest and a lack of care. The cemetery just became overgrown, and tombstones had fallen over, prairie dogs had burrowed into the hills, and even cattle were allowed to graze among the headstones and the graves. Now, for some time, affluent families had started burying their loved ones at the newer Riverside and Fairlawn cemeteries, and they were leaving the city cemetery for the paupers and the criminals, transients, unclaimed smallpox and typhus victims, from the local penthouse, which was the poor farm. Mm-hmm. Now, meanwhile, ownership of the cemetery passed from Larimer to a cabinet maker named John Wally. And John Wally soon went into the undertaking business, but he did little, if anything, to improve the situation. And there were new homes and mansions being built nearby, so the city government was being pressured to do something about this cemetery. So they found a way to pull a fast one over on owner John Wally. Someone in the U.S. government discovered that the cemetery was on land that was part of an Indian treaty that dated back before 1860. So this made the United States the legitimate owner of the property. And in 1890, they sold it to the city of Denver for $200. Now, the city soon went to work on this. During Wally's ownership, the cemetery had been divided into 3 sections. The city's portion had deteriorated. There was a Catholic and Jewish sections also. But the Catholic and Jewish sections were well maintained. But after the city took over the land, the Jewish churches removed their dead from the graveyard and leased the land to the city's water department. The Catholic Church ended up purchasing their own land and until 1950 kept the cemetery in excellent condition. The following summer, though, City Hall announced that all interested parties should remove their dead from the city cemetery for burial elsewhere. And they had 90 days to do this. Oh, excuse me, I'm having a little problems with my throat. So some were reburied by concerned family members, but more than 5,000 of the dead were forgotten and they went unclaimed.
Gosh,
now,
that alone that would create a lot of paranormal.
I know, that is a big number. In the early spring of 1893, they made preparations to remove these bodies. And at that time, Denver's mayor, Platt Rogers, what a name, who was worried about the health hazards, of opening these graves, was out of town. Mm-hmm. Now, ordinances were passed to release funds for the removal, so this unscrupulous undertaker named E.F. McGovern was awarded the contract. Now, he specified that each body would be dug up, then placed in a new box at the site, but the box would only be 3.5 feet long and 1 foot wide. And for each box delivered to Riverside Cemetery, McGovern was going to be paid $1.90 for each one. That doesn't seem like a whole lot, but for 5,000 people, that's a lot of money. Back then, it was a lot of money, too. Now, in March, McGovern's men went to work.
It just seems... go ahead. I would be annoyed a little bit by...
Oh, I know.
Him moving all this stuff. Your smoke break's over. That was 3 minutes ago.
I lost my place. Oh. Anyway, I
just said that because you lit up a smoke, so I was giving you a hard time.
Yes, I did, as a matter of fact. Okay, in March, McGovern's men, went to work on doing this. And in the beginning, there were curiosity seekers and reporters would come out to watch. And at first, the work went in an orderly and smooth fashion.
Right.
But it didn't take long for the work to become careless. Now, according to the legends, an old woman came down to speak to the men and told them that they should whisper a prayer over every body that was dug up or the dead would return. Now, even though the workmen laughed at her, they had a hard time hiding their uneasiness.
I feel like we talked about this place in some other show at some point because I remember something like this about a bunch of bodies being removed and moved to another place, but then they left half the bones scattered about.
Right. I don't remember what cemetery that was, but we did have a show on
something similar like that.
Yeah, something similar.
So obviously this happens in a lot of places, not just this one time, but it's happened in other places. But they did kind of leave half the bodies here, there, and everywhere.
Right.
Like.
They sure did. But even though, like I said, the workmen laughed at her, they were uneasy doing this work. And in their haste to get this job done, they allowed souvenir hunters and onlookers to help themselves to items from the caskets. Some of the bodies had not decayed enough to fit into these small wooden boxes. They were broken apart and shoveled out of the old caskets. Now, during this so-called work, the workers claimed to have felt being touched, and when they would turn to look, no one was there. Now, there was one worker, his name was Jim Aston, and he claimed that while he was working, he had felt his hand on his shoulder. and he looked and there was no one there. So he dropped all these brass plates that he had stolen off of some of the coffins, and he ran off, and he never came back.
Could you imagine if he succeeded in that? I mean, his whole whoever those plaques or plates went to at some point, I would think that there should be some bad mojo that goes along with that. Even
There
if we
should
weren't
be.
being haunted by the person that it was on, but even just by an energy or an entity, just because of the negative nature that you were doing with that.
Well,
As far as robbing graves and stuff, there's got to be some kind of negative thing that would start chasing you
well,
down.
my personal opinion is if you rob a cemetery or if you vandalize a cemetery, or if rob graves and stuff, you deserve to be haunted.
More than that.
More than
that's
that,
disrespectful.
exactly.
That's somebody's family member. I mean, you got to be pretty dang low. You don't mind robbing from the living, you just start robbing from the dead and everywhere else. I mean,
There's got to be a special place in hell for people like that.
Yeah,
that's just my personal.
You have to
belief.
be soulless mother trucker to be like that.
Exactly.
It's disgusting.
I know. Some of the owners of the nearby mansions had started to report that these ghostly apparitions started appearing in their homes. And this included confused spirits knocking at their doors and windows all hours of the day and night.
Whoa.
Now, there were reports of low moaning sounds being heard outside their homes at night. And in fact, this is still reported today. These spirits are invading the mansions that are around this park. By the time Mayor Rogers returned to town, the local newspapers were running front page stories about the atrocities being committed at this cemetery and of the corruption at City Hall over this. And the stories brought to light that there were discrepancies between the number of reburials being charged to the city and the actual number of boxes being delivered to Riverside Cemetery.
Dang.
This had become a full-blown scandal.
It is. It's a big scam. It's awful.
It is. It was a scam. And but with the help of the health commissioner, the project was brought to a halt.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there was an investigation, and the gaping holes in the ground went unfilled. But eventually, the rest of the bodies would be forgotten, and they are still there to this day under the park grounds and gardens. Now, not everybody was moved.
Right.
In 1907, work was completed, and the city cemetery became Cheeseman Park. And they named it in honor of Walter S. Cheeseman, who was a prominent citizen of Denver. And then 2 years later, a marble pavilion was constructed in his memory in 1950. Now, the Catholic Church sold its adjacent cemetery, and there was and they removed all of the bodies and buried them elsewhere. And since then, that portion of the land became Denver's botanical gardens. Now, what was once the Jewish section of the cemetery is now Congress Park.
Uh-huh.
So they're kind of, Congress Park and Cheeseman Park are connected. The park is very active today. Apparitions can be seen almost on a daily and nightly basis. You'd be walking through this park and you'll see an apparition, and they say that you can see right through it, or it might look solid, like, a living person walking towards you, and then all of a sudden just disappear. And there are a lot of spirits in this park. They like I said, they have the spirits have even invaded the nearby mansions. Now, people report being touched when they walk through this park. They report feelings of sadness and despair. And there are reports of moaning being heard, and apparitions are too numerous to count. So if you're ever in Denver and you want to take a walk through Cheeseman Park. That is, if you're in mood for a ghostly encounter.
Well, I think this place alone would have just a plethora of activity just because of the story, the history that you were just talking about. and how these bodies were desecrated, basically. And
Basically, you're right. That's exactly what happened to them.
and they were scattered about. Nobody really cared about it. People were robbing from these different graves and taking what they wanted when they wanted.
Even the workmen were robbing the graves, and and anybody that came along, they just let them take a souvenir. You
Yeah.
know, I mean, what kind of a person would want a souvenir from a dead body that's been in the ground for years,
Well,
decades? You know,
right. The thing is, like, what's going on is I think that any type of paranormal activity that may be occurring here is because of just that incident of what was occurring. Because I can only imagine what it would stir up. And even if it's not just because of the spirit of the body, but the family members who were grieving over this tragedy that occurred. You know what I mean? And so I just think that I think one of the creepier things is if you're in this park and you said some of these apparitions are like solid almost like you wouldn't even know the dude who just walked by you if they were dead or not. That'd be kind of trippy. You know what I mean? It makes you kind of wonder how many dead people walk by you every single day and you just kind of in your own zone, especially nowadays since everybody's like on their phone, on an iPad, tablet, blah, 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 all those little technology things. Everybody's so engrossed into their own self-world that who knows? They could have like freaking Bigfoot and a werewolf riding the bus with you, and you wouldn't even know because you're too busy looking down at your phone nowadays.
well,
But
Starry Night made a point. She said, considering how old the human race is, human remains are likely under our feet at any given time, which is true because, you know, like the pioneers, you know, they buried their dead where they died. And there were a lot of them that died, you know, on their trek from the east to the west.
well, you have Native Americans
You
too.
have
Their
Native
bones-
Americans.
Their bones, I mean, they had sacred places that were just destroyed for
Right.
eons and nobody cared about. And there's only a few mounds that are protected nowadays. But
Right.
if you happen to find bones on your property, you're supposed to call the authorities. One, not just because it could be like a murder, but it could also be native burial ground too, you know what I'm saying? So, but I don't know. This park might be interesting to go to. To me, wouldn't be on top of my list. But I think
it's
if
not
you were
on top of my list, but I would still take a walk through it.
right, I think that if anybody, because I mean, you know, anybody who's like sensitive, because to me, everybody, this is my opinion. I think we're all spirits, you know, and we're all connected, and everything's made up of energy, so everything's connected. And some people who are, you know, living more in the spiritual sense and less in the carnal sense, they might be able to pick up on these spirits' feelings of like you said, emotions, feeling dread or anger or,
Yeah.
you know, all
And
the
even
different
these
emotions.
and even these beautiful, expensive mansions that are built beside this park. And some of them, you know, they're built so close to the park, it's almost like the park is their front yards. I mean, they're getting these spirits. These spirits are coming into their homes,
knocking on their doors and windows.
knocking on their doors, knocking on their windows, you know, coming into their homes. It's and it's not only the mansions, you know, like on the other side of the park there are businesses and stuff. So, and they're getting them. So, I mean, this place is very, very active.
I wonder what time you can go in and about in this park. I mean, I wonder if people could go in there after dark and do like, you know, paranormal investigating, or do
don't
they
know.
have
There
like
was-
rules like parks closed at such and such time?
I really don't know. I would imagine there can't be too much of a curfew because of the mansions that are built so close to the place. Because, I mean, let's face it, I do this once in a while. I like to take an evening walk, or maybe, you know, a nightly walk sometimes. And of course, the place for them to go, the obvious place for them to go would be to walk a little ways through this park. But personally, you know, I can't see too many people doing that because of all of the hauntings and everything in this park, all the apparitions that they're seeing.
Well, right,
And
but
they said you'll see these apparitions any time in the day or the night. I mean, there were 500 bodies buried there, or 5,000 bodies buried there. And actually, this undertaker ended up only removing just a couple hundred. So you still got at least 48,000 bodies in this cemetery that are still buried in this park.
Well, do they have like a plaque up for
I didn't see anything about it. As a matter of fact, I would think since it's in such an affluent neighborhood that they probably don't want to advertise it too much.
But there's a lot of places that do have a plaque or it's sectioned off, out of respect. They should have something up out of respect because maybe it might help calm down some of the energy. But I'm just saying, if there's supposedly these people who because there's people who go around who say they're gifted or they're psychic, and I think anybody can tune in to
There's
things at
probably a
times,
plaque
but I'm
there
sure
somewhere that probably says, this used to be the site of the city cemetery. I don't know.
Right, but what I was saying is
I have no idea.
There's some people who seem to have more sensitivity, so I'm thinking it'd probably be really hard for them to go through this park or in this area if there's like a plethora of different energy going on with different emotions. Because if somebody because I think everybody's connected and I think everybody can tune into something once in a while. But I'm thinking for those people who are more aware of their abilities or whatever you want to call it, I'm thinking if they went to this park, it might be a little overwhelming just because of this tragedy that you were talking about.
Well, I would be kind of worried about the spirits because I would be willing to bet that most of the bodies left were in the section where the criminals and the paupers were buried.
Yeah. I just think
because those would be the ones less likely to be claimed.
Right. I just think this would be an interesting place, especially for people who are very sensitive. And maybe there's some people who don't even realize they're sensitive or they don't even know the history. And then they walk through this park and then they pick up some energy or pick up an attachment coming home with them. And they don't even know why they're feeling the way that they feel. Just the history and the story behind this is very sad, but I can definitely understand why, if this place is experiencing paranormal activity, why it would be. I mean, that alone, it wouldn't just be the people who are buried there, but it's got to all be the friends and family who cared about their missing loved ones, because maybe they didn't even really document the bodies and just started throwing them wherever and claimed it was so-and-so's body, and it really wasn't. So that might be there would be so many people why they haven't.
And I would imagine that even if they got most of the bodies, there would still be more there than they would think, because I'm sure that a lot of those graves were unmarked. It wasn't likely that they would mark a criminal's body, a criminal's grave, and it's like that one guy that killed his brother-in-law. Him and his brother-in-law were just dumped into the same hole and covered up, and I would just about be willing to bet, unless their family did anything, there was no marker on that grave.
When you were saying you're going through walks and parks and stuff like that, my first thought was like, if you were walking through a park and you heard moaning coming from the bushes, I don't think your first thought would be like, oh, it's paranormal.
No, it wouldn't be.
You'd be like,
no, it wouldn't be.
You'd be like, go home, use a room.
But knowing me, I'd have to go over there and look just to make sure.
That was spooky.
Oh, excuse me.
Yeah, that was spooky. Who's like, gonna peer in the bushes. But I mean, if I was cruising around a park and I heard moaning coming from a bush, my first thought wouldn't be like, oh, that's paranormal. I'd be like, oh my god.
No, it wouldn't be.
It'd be like, creepers, I'm out of here. You know what I mean?
Really.
But I don't know, to me, I definitely think if there is paranormal activity, it's definitely from that, and that's just a horrible story to what happened to these people. You know what I mean? But
yeah,
I don't know, do you care if we go on to the next one?
No, let's do.
Okay, I picked this one because it seemed kind of interesting too. It's called the Hotel St. Nicholas, and it's located on 303 3rd Street, Cripple Creek, Colorado. And actually, Cripple Creek is kind of like a cool little place because there's like a lot going on there too. I would just go just to hang out.
I almost did a story on Cripple Creek.
Did you? I was reading so much from Cripple.
And for some reason, I said, no, I'll go on.
Right. Well, Cripple Creek has this a lot. We could have done a whole show just on Cripple Creek of all the different haunted places just in Cripple Creek, Colorado. But the Hotel St. Nicholas that I found seems to be kind of a big hot spot where there's a lot of activity going on. But they said this building was built in 1898, and it was originally built for and used as a hospital for like all the miners and the people that were coming into Colorado in droves during that time in search for their riches, because like we said, they're going the silver and the gold rush and all that stuff. Right. But it was opened by the Sisters of Mercy and St. Nicholas Hospital. It also, after a little while since it was open, they started to use it, part of the building, for school for some of the students of the children that were coming in with these families. And then I think in 1901, they added a mental ward too, because I guess a lot of people started going crazy after the gold rush. I don't know. Anyway, I guess that a bunch of crazy people were attracted
Well,
to...
there was a thing back then called gold fever.
Oh, really? Well, I don't think it
Yeah.
really made people go nuts.
It wasn't a sickness. It brought out their greed.
Yeah. Well, if you're drinking a lot, and I guess, could you imagine taking a long journey from one side of the country to the other? I mean, you could lose your mind just going through the wilds of the United States during that time.
I lose my mind in a house full of kids.
I thought you were going to say, I lose my mind just talking to you sometimes. No, no. But before this building was actually built, the sisters, they actually worked from wooden buildings back in the day. And then one of the smaller wooden buildings that they had over like 307 patients. But there was like this massive fire that broke out in Cripple Creek. So a lot of the buildings, what they did is some of the guys, they took dynamite and they started blowing up a bunch of the buildings so they wouldn't catch on fire, because back in the day it's hard to put out a whole freaking town of fire.
Right.
You know, they don't have the equipment like we have and the means, so the fire would just spread and spread and spread to all these wooden buildings. So what they were doing was, while some of the fires were going and some people were trying to put out those fires, other crazy guys, I think, who were just drunk and thought, hey, this will be a fun idea, let's take some dynamite and start blowing up all the other buildings so they don't catch on fire. Irregardless, you don't have a building. You know what I mean?
The reason they did that was because if they blew up a building, then the fire couldn't spread to that building, therefore it couldn't spread to the next building. They mainly did that to stop the fire from spreading more than what it was.
I know that's what I said earlier, but I'm just saying, I'm thinking a couple drunks just thought, hey, we got a bunch of dynamite. I think it's somebody who just liked to blow things up, really.
Could have been.
Said, hey, let's do this. So after...
I can just see it. Two guys in a saloon. Fire! Get the dynamite!
We'll help out. We'll blow up the other buildings.
We'll take care of this.
Right. But so that's when the next building was built out of brick, actually, in 1898. But they ended up helping a lot of people, you know, throughout the years. And I think it was until, like, when the mining kind of just played out in the area, that's when the hospital just kind of shut down and closed its doors. And that was, like, in the 1970s. And for a little bit of time when it was closed, I ended up using this building for like a boarding house. And then after that, it kind of just stood vacant for like a couple decades. And then in like 1995, these people came and they purchased it. And then it was like restored and turned into the inn that it is now. And it's on the... After they did that, that's when it got on to the National Registry of Historic Places, which it seems like almost every place in Colorado is. I'll say that again,
Yeah, really.
But it seems like everyone we're reading is. But maybe Rusty's place will become on a historic place too. But this Hotel St. Nicholas, what they're saying is like an amazing hotel. You can see like a great view of Cripple Creek all the way around. There's like 15 rooms and a tavern. And many of the people who have owned this building or have been in it over the years have made claims that this historic building seems to have a lot of paranormal activity. And they say that it's being visited by spirits of like nuns and little children and former hospital patients, which I'm, you know, probably the ones who passed in there or didn't make it, or maybe even some of the mental ill patients that's saying. Yeah. They say one of the apparitions that they see a lot kind of hangs out by the old staircase. And what it is that the spirit that hangs out by the back staircase, it always gives off like this really awful, foul smell. And so they named it, the staff members call it Stinky, you know, just because.
Oh, what else would they call it?
Stinky. You know,
Stinky.
But it gives off like a smell of like garbage and decay every time back there. But they say many have seen this apparition of like this old miner. But the old miner, the only thing they see of him is his legs and his bottom half. They don't see his upper body, which makes me wonder, how did they know it's a miner? Is he carrying around like a pitchfork or something? Or not a pitchfork, but a mining axe or what? I mean, how do they know? Did like
pickaxe?
Yeah, I mean, did the miners always wear the same type of pants so they knew it was a miner? I don't know how they knew it was a miner since the upper part of the body's missing. But there's also a spirit of like a little boy that's being seen a lot, and they call that little boy Petey. and he's seen in various areas of the hotel. And many of the items that the guests have when they're staying there, as well as like the patrons of the tavern, have their belongings just go missing, or they're moved into other rooms or other areas. And many think it's the little boy spirit that's kind of being mischievous, and he's the one who's moving these people's items. Because some of these items will be moved from one room and then moved into another room that's a locked door. So there's no way somebody's wallet or personal belongings, when they're staying in the hotel, can be moved into like a different room.
Right.
It's a room that's locked off, and nobody has a way to it, except for maybe a couple staff members who might have a key or something. A lot of people talk about hearing disembodied footsteps throughout the hotel and the tavern, and when they turn around, there's nobody there. When they look in the hallway, nobody's there. They say there's an old spirit of a man who's often seen sitting on a stool in one of the back offices, and I don't know, he just hangs out there. I don't know if he's probably one of the previous owners or somebody who worked there, or just somebody who likes the person who hangs out in the office. I have no idea. But the back staircase where the people smell this god-awful smell, and the spirit that they call stinky, it's usually seen more by the staff members and not so much people who are staying there. You know what I mean? Because the people who work there tend to use the back stairs more than the guests do when they stay at the hotel or whatever. But a lot of people claim
Makes sense.
But a lot of people claim that they've heard and or captured disembodied voices as well. But it seems like a lot of activities happening in the tavern a lot. There's bottles and glasses being moved. People are seeing things out of the corner of their eye, and a lot of different things like that, So Spring Creek alone would be a cool place just to go, because when I was reading, it seemed like the whole freaking town was haunted.
That's what I read, that the entire town is haunted. It's not just this one place, it's the entire town.
Somebody said, Bear said, how people could tell that guy was a miner because he has "my name is" sticker on his pants. My name is,
Stinky.
Stinky, and I used to be a miner, but
but that's another show.
Maybe that's why. No, but I don't know. I think I've wanted to do more on Spring Creek, Colorado, just because there's so much in that town that's going on.
Even the road to Cripple Creek in places is haunted.
Cripple Creek. I don't know what I just said. I'm mixing up towns. But yeah, Cripple Creek, it's got a lot. There's activity happening all over the place in the cemeteries.
And the place is kind of isolated because the road that you go down is a dirt road.
Right.
And there are these 3 tunnels that you have to go through. And they say that even the tunnels are haunted.
Right. The thing is it seems like the towns that tend to have a lot more activity are the ones where people actually left the buildings exactly the way they were, and just kept them up. They didn't really do a whole lot of changes. And then the people who did change some parts inside the building, then they have a ton of activity. But a lot of these old time towns, which seems to be a lot in Colorado, so that alone attracts me to Colorado, because it's almost like you're stepping back into history. And history is a cool thing in general,
Yes, it is.
So
I love history, especially American history. I just love history.
But since this was used as a hospital a lot, and then there was a huge fire going on, and a lot of people were dying from different things back then, and they were brought into this hospital, and a lot of bodies were stored on a certain level, I could see why there would be paranormal activity. You know what I mean? But but I find it fascinating that there's objects actually being physically moved, transported. It's not like you're walking down the hallway and then all of a sudden you see someone's suitcase float right past you. It's like nobody's seeing it being moved. It just physically is moved.
I just kind of wonder though if these things, these things end up in a locked room, and I wonder if they end up in the same room every time. If Petey has a favorite room, if one of the guests say, hey, this is missing from my room, the clerk says, hand me the key to Petey's room.
Yeah, there's 2 rooms that they say that these objects keep showing up into and stuff, and they're for back offices and stuff that people aren't really using. So for it to leave one space and go into another, they kind of have an idea where to kind of look. but still,
Right.
it's a very interesting thing. And I think one of the thing that cracked me up is like, to me, when they were, and I know why they were dynamiting the buildings to stop the fire, but I just had envisioned, just like you did, a couple of town drunks were like, hey, we'll save the town, let's go blow
I know.
let's go blow some things up. It's like they're big old fireworks, you know what I mean? But
Yeah. Hey, look, Homer, fire. Go get the dynamite.
yeah, but definitely, if you guys do go to Colorado, try to make it to Cripple Creek, because Cripple Creek is actually really beautiful looking from what I saw on Google Earth, and just kind of skipping around that way. But there is a lot of paranormal activity. It seemed like almost every single building had something going on, or there was something going on outside in the street, and people are seeing full body apparitions, to hearing things, and you're actually hearing and seeing things without equipment, and to me that's
Yeah.
even cooler, to be able to experience
Yeah,
something
it
without
is.
having to wait and play back something, but to hear it, and not just you, but your friends with you are hearing.
Well, they
and
say
seeing
that you
this.
could walk down the street in Cripple Creek and encounter apparitions anywhere in the town.
Yeah.
Even walking down the street. So it's one of those that it would be an awesome place to go to, because just about everywhere you go in that town, it's haunted.
Yeah, I think it's
paranormal
cool,
activity.
but definitely you guys check out, if you can, whoever's listening now or listens later, kind of go check out Cripple Creek for haunted areas and stuff, and you're going to read a lot of fascinating things, also history stuff, but,
Exactly.
I'm glad that, like I said, Rusty picked Colorado, because it's fair. I just was
I
reading
know.
so much.
It was so hard to choose, a subject. Wheat Ridge, Colorado, the Wheat Ridge Mental Institution, also known as the Ridge and also known as Home Ridge. Now, in 1909, 2 miles west of Arvada, the state of Colorado planned for a mental hospital to be named Ridge Home. I said Home Ridge. I meant Ridge Home. It was located at approximately 57th Street and Kipling. Now, Ridge Home was completed in 1910, but the final building wasn't exactly finished until 1936. Now, the main administration building bore the cornerstone saying AD 1910 State Home and Training School for Mental Defectives.
Wow.
I like that.
Yeah.
For mental defectives. Founded by the state of Colorado through the efforts of Ella Parrish Williams of the Board of Correctives, which I found that interesting, because she is on the Board of Correctives, and this is a mental institution. Anyway, the first patient arrived in July of 1912, and by 1936, Ridge had an enrollment of 260, and they had a capacity for 300 patients. Now, those who were committed to Ridge were there for the rest of their life, unless they were transferred to Pueblo Insane Asylum. And among the original buildings was a school, a farm that patients would work at with supervision, and it was basically at that time self-sustaining. Now, it was also made a stop on the tramway to Golden, and the efforts of this Simon Guggenheim, it established its own separate post office. So this place had its own zip code. Well, back then I don't think they had zip codes, but anyway, according to one nurse who worked there in the 1960s, the people at Ridge were always drugged, but that was not really an uncommon practice in this type of facilities. That's how they controlled them. They kept them drugged. She also claims that perfectly normal kids were dropped off there, but ended up living there all their lives, and so they became socially, mentally disabled. People seem to be dropped off at Ridge and forgotten, basically. And this was Arvada's dirty little secret, because not only were there mental patients in there were normal kids in there that their parents just dropped them off and left them. And not only that, not only normal kids, but other normal people too, adults. There were also stories told of physical and sexual abuse happening in the place. Now, in 1989, the federal government started to get complaints from local residents and family members on this place. And in response, the government threatened to charge Ridge with an 8 million charge them 8 million if the state didn't improve the conditions. And according to one nurse, Ridge Home was constantly littered with the body waste of the patients, using every part of Ridge as a bathroom, and the orderlies just did not seem to care. So, I mean, besides having unqualified staff, they had lazy orderlies. They didn't care. They were just there drawing their checks.
It's kind of like a little bit to that today too still. I mean, some of these places, not just mental facilities, but old folks homes too.
Yeah,
the way that they mistreat people, I meant.
I know, you really have to keep an eye on those places when you have people in them, relatives in them. When two federal agents arrived to inspect the conditions at this place, they observed two orderlies using excessive force on a patient. Now, in 1990, they determined that Ridge needed 155 new staffers, but that meant that they had to spend at least $1.3 million to get a new staff. And the people who ran Ridge said that everything there was safe and all was fine. So they refused to do anything that they were asked to do by the federal government. So a lawsuit was filed in 1989, and in 1990, they were given 5 days to get things fixed. Well, the staff, of course, started complaining that 5 days was too short of a deadline. And family members of the current residents started worrying that, this place would be gone, and what are they going to do with their people that they have in there? So Ridge got a 90-day reprieve because the feds found that the conditions at Ridge was getting better. When this reprieve ran out on July 8th in 1990, the deadline was extended to August 17th. But on August 29th, in 1990, the feds decided that it was enough, and they cut off more than $12 million in Medicaid funds to run this place. The state decided that this was wrong and appealed, claiming that they had taken massive steps to clean up, but the funding was cut off. So against medical protocol, Ridge Home decided to move patients out into the communities. But at the time, neither the communities or the patients were really ready for this. Since their funding was cut off, they were going to get rid of some of these patients. So they were moved into group homes. And that's where many of them actually reside today. Mm-hmm. Now, the home supposedly was closed in 1991, and only severely ill patients were allowed to live there, and this included 22 mentally disabled sex offenders. And they were there as of April of 1991. Or 99. Now, in September of 91, a fire ran through one of the abandoned buildings, and it was the third fire in 2 months.
Probably vandalism or something. Maybe.
Yeah, well, no one was hurt, and the following day, a security guard was arrested on suspicion of setting the building on fire. His name was Michael King. He was 24 years old, and he'd only been there for 2 weeks.
So he was like a firebug.
Yeah, well, he later admitted that he set the fire in the attic of the administration building.
Why? That's dumb.
I don't know.
It's funny. Somebody who's a security guard. Well, yeah, somebody who works for a security guard for a mental ward almost seems like he should have been staying in the mental ward.
They hired an outside security company. I think it was called Burns International Security Services. But why he set the fires, I don't know. I just think that he was a firebug. The buildings became a dumping ground and a safety hazard throughout the years, and there were several plans that were being made for this site, like housing for troubled teens, an amusement park, a rec center, other houses, commercial use. But the problem was that the cleanup of the asbestos alone was a major factor in these plans, because it would cost around $5 million to clean it all. But in 2006, there were plans to demolish the site and build this new shopping center, which they did. And the demolishing of the site took quite some time because of the asbestos removal and filling in the tunnels that were underneath the property. Now, by the end of 2007, Ridge Home was gone. And there's a mall there now, along what was the back half of the Ridge Home property. Now, there is a super Target in this mall, and it's at the very back. And the front half of the site is still vacant, but the original gate and entrance are there. And the main entrance, you actually had to cross a railroad track, and the crossing signals are still there. Now, over the years that the home was active, patients and staff claimed to have seen apparitions as well as hear strange noises. And these reports included objects moving on their own and even the ghost of children running through the hall. Well, today, it seems that the super Target inherited the paranormal activity, because there are reports in this super Target of things flying off the shelves by themselves, voices, loud crying, and numerous apparitions.
You know, because of the way people were treated back then, and people who had no issues would be tossed into these asylums, because I mean, if you went back and read why people were put in asylums, you put in an asylum because you had sex out of marriage. You put in an asylum because you drank. You put in an asylum because nobody wanted you. You were put
into asylum because you were wild and your parents couldn't control you.
You were put in an asylum just because you were born. You're put in an asylum because your husband was tired of your yapping. You know, just everybody was thrown into asylum, and they'd take him because you get money and they get paid to have these people, so they don't care. We're like, all right.
And back then, when you were put into an asylum, you know, I mean, not in the 2000s or even the 1990s, or maybe not even in the 1880s, but before that, if you were put into an asylum, the state paid the asylum. Well, you didn't pay it, the state paid it.
Right, but I can understand why a lot of these asylums and hospital wards and stuff would be haunted or tend to still have the spirits hanging around, just because of what occurred to them while they were there, the way that they were treated.
And also the staff. You know, they didn't run the background checks back then like they do now. And I still think that they're a little lax on the background checks for these places. But anybody that applied for a job, you know, if they had an opening, you were hired. You know, they didn't care. They didn't even check your work record or anything. They didn't even check your police record back then.
Some of these different, because I find some of these asylums and different things and stuff, and I would read up on the history and some of the things that occur there, and the way that there was like this huge documentary thing that, what was that guy's name? He used to be like this talk show host. He was Geraldo Rivera or somebody like that. I don't remember what his name was. Do you know who I'm talking about?
It's more than likely Geraldo Rivera, maybe.
Yeah, that's
Phil Donahue.
No, that first name you said.
It would have to be Geraldo.
Yeah, that first name you said. I saw something on Netflix or some TV show where he was replaying, because he actually had it during the 80s or something, or 70s. I don't know what it was.
Well, he's been an investigative reporter for years.
But he went in and they snuck these cameras in, and they somehow got in. I don't know if they paid somebody off to get in, but they were showing the ill treatment of mental patients and people, and some people who go stay in there. They be, you know, like people who had Alzheimer's, or, you know, just handicapped people for no reason, and they were showing everything, the treatment and the ill treatment going on. And when I saw that, I mean, I can only imagine what they did in the past would have been a lot worse. So I could see why entities or spirits would hang out here.
Well, and they were abusing these people who were drugged that couldn't fight back. They wouldn't abuse one that wasn't on drugs. But back then they kept them drugged because that's how they controlled them.
Well, they didn't care, but they didn't.
No, they didn't care. They just wanted to collect their money for these people, because a lot of them were underfed. They weren't cleaned up. You know, or anything.
Yeah, they didn't feed them, they didn't clean them, they didn't shower them, they left them in their own feces, and there's a lot of places that have been doing this for a long time, and I don't even know how well some of the places are now, you know, but they're probably a little bit better regulated. But just all the things that they were going through, I can see why these type of places have this leftover residual type of hauntings, or if they do have paranormal activity or whatever else. But I think I'm going to go on to the next one real quick, because we only have like 10 minutes left before the show's over. So I want to get the last one in or whatever. And there's like so billions of more I want to do, but we just only do a 2-hour show. But the I can't even talk anymore. Get my words out. This hotel is located.
Beaumont.
Yeah, I can't talk for whatever. I'm shutting down.
I know. I was starting to shut down too.
Yeah, it's hard doing like a couple hours straight of a show.
Yeah, it is.
All this information and get it all out real fast. But it's located on 505 Main Street, Ouray, Colorado. I think that's the name of the town. But it was built in 1879 during the mining rush of Colorado, and this hotel was used as a point for the stagecoach as well as a stop for those who traveled on the railroad. Now, this building of brick was one of the first buildings that I read in this area to have and provide electricity during the day back then, AC. And the hotel even had its own private staircase for the ladies to access their clients, so nobody up front would see these ladies coming and going for these people that needed their services. Well, that private staircase is still there today, but it's used mainly only by staff members. But when the mining began to shut down in this area, because you know how one shut down and then moved to the next and moved to the next,
Right.
Well, that's when this hotel and everything started to kind of slowly go down. But this hotel was closed in 1964, and it was kind of just left to its own demise until 1998 when it was purchased and remodeled. Now, most of the original building still stands today, and the hotel lounge is named after the last known working girl, Lula Huey, I think that was her name. And her and her daughter are seen in the hotel, but her daughter, when she worked there, would often play about the hotel as well. And it was said that in 1887, a hotel waitress named, I think her name was Ellen. I don't know why I didn't finish my note there. She was shot several times by one of the chefs who worked there. She was like murdered, right? Kind of like in front of everybody. Now, many people have seen, many people, also a bunch of the owners who owned this place, have claimed that this hotel or this building has a lot of paranormal activity. And what they're saying is that the doors would lock or unlock themselves in many different rooms. They would smell like perfume or smoke in the hotel rooms as well as in the hallways. And people's items would be moved about here too. Now, some have actually seen a figure downstairs in like the tavern. They'll be sitting there at the bar or whatever, and then you look up in the mirror and there'll be somebody standing behind them. And then when they turn around, that person's not there, but they were in the mirror. Now, they also say that lights are turned on and off by themselves. Door handles will like jiggle on their own, and then when they go to the door and look, there's nobody there to why these door handles are like acting like somebody's coming in. A lot of people see fog or mist lots of times in the hallway. It's like a thick fog, and that's kind of abnormal because you don't have that type of thing occurring inside of a building. A lot of people said that they're seeing full body apparitions of a nurse that's been seen sitting on the edge of a bed in some people's room once in a while. And other people have seen a woman in a full white dress up on the third floor kind of roaming about. They say that there's chairs being moved in the empty rooms. What they do is they take, all these chairs are kind of set in a certain place. You know how you got a hotel room, you have a chair to go hang out and sit at while you're reading a book or whatever. They say a lot of these rooms that aren't being used, the chairs will be pushed up against the door just enough where you can still kind of get in, but definitely somebody put it there, and you can't put it there unless you've been in the room. And how do you leave the room? You're blocking the door. So they can't explain how these chairs are constantly being moved up against the door and kind of blocking it. And radios are constantly being turned on and off to alarms and other things. People are hearing disembodied footsteps, they're hearing voices, and many areas of the hotel they're hearing little kids running about, which I think it's probably that lady's daughter, because it said her daughter and a couple of her cousins would always hang out while the mom was working, and then sometimes they'd bother the guys or get some of the guys to go up and hang out with her mom. So, but that one last working girl and her daughter seems to be one of the people they tend to see a lot of. Also, this, whatever reason, they think it's a nurse just because the way she was dressed back then.
Yeah.
Seems to hang out and sit at the edge of people's beds, kind of just staring at them. I don't know if she was checking on them or why she's there, or if it's like a residual thing or whatever. But, you know, this hotel, this space was used for multiple different things throughout the years. But its first main thing, it was used for a stop along the way when people are traveling from here to there in Colorado, you know, during the gold rush time period and stuff like that. But it's not the only place in that town that's haunted too. Like I said, I was really surprised how active Colorado is. And it's just like there's multiple places in just a town here, a little city here, where you could just be busy just in that one place.
I know. I Googled haunted Colorado and just got a number of places, you know, and I'm going through the list and I'm thinking, well, is this the entire state, every town in this state?
Yeah, you could just go to anybody's house, any restaurant, any hopper, to whatever, randomly walking down the road, and you're going to encounter some kind of weird paranormal activity. But there's also people who talk about supposed sightings of Bigfoot occurring in this state as well. So it seems like there's a lot going on when it comes to
You
Colorado.
have the Rocky Mountains there. You probably have a lot of strange creatures in those mountains.
Strange men running about.
Yeah, really.
Well, they say there's people who live out in the mountains and the hills that would come down and take people hostage and women and just bring them back up to where they have their little place and keep them too.
Yeah.
You've read stories about that, not just in Colorado, but I think I read it in Virginia too, where they call mountain people, you know, so
Yeah.
there's a lot going on. That's the last that I have for tonight, because we really wanted to do a whole lot more, but we only do a 2-hour show. We're not going to sit on 4 or 5, 10 hours. We can't do that. So hopefully you guys enjoyed what we threw out there for you tonight. I mean, if you're going to go paranormal touring and paranormal vacation, you got to go to Colorado, because
Yeah. If you live near Colorado, just take a road trip. Go over there. Just about any place you can go. It's got something going on.
Right. Why don't you tell everybody what we're going to do next show?
I want to thank our mods for doing such a good job, and thank you everybody that came in to chat and who are listening to us. Thank you, Raven, for a good show. Join us Tuesday, April 26th, when we will discuss deadliest women. I will get it out. We will discuss deadliest women throughout history. Catherine Mary Knight and Nancy Nanny Hazel Doss. Now, I'm going to give you a warning. Some content may be disturbing to some, and if you're easily offended or sensitive to certain descriptions, we strongly recommend listener discretion.
Right. Well, it's basically about deadliest women throughout history is a reoccurring theme that we have, and it's on, you know, women that kill or murder or serial killer type of women and stuff. It's something that people have been interested in. So
and we chose a couple of good ones.
Yeah, I mean, you could go forever on that stuff too.
Oh, I know. And thank you for coming. And please subscribe to us, give us a like, and share us with others on any social media you may be a part of.
Yeah, thank you for coming. Thanks, Rusty, for suggesting Colorado. I mean, it was very fascinating. Thank you all for sharing us, and we'll see you guys at other shows. If you want show reminders, you can click on the little cog wheel down by our Spooky Raven name where it says subscribe, and you can get notifications, or you can go to our website and sign up for email reminders, or find us on Facebook or Google to see our show announcements. But thank you, everybody, for hanging out with us, and we'll see you around.
Good night, everyone.